All right, good afternoon. Welcome to all. 2/6/24 meeting of the Flathead Reservation Valley Management Board. We always like to start with an opening prayer, so Georgia has been so kind to help us out with that, and you want us to continue to do so. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to come together and to serve our community. We thank you for bringing us all safely here, and we ask for traveling mercies for those who have to travel and for healing for those who are struggling with any kind of sickness or ailment. And Lord, as we go through this agenda today, we just ask that you give us wisdom and discernment and help us to approach this with a real heart of service. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Georgia. Okay, so I don't know, sometimes I can see better with or without my glasses. Meeting minutes, those who are online and those of the public can always be seen on the DNRC and CSKT websites. 1.3, disclose any potential conflicts of interest. So we go around, and if you've had a chance to look at the agenda, we just check to see if there's any. If there is, just please advise, and we'll deal with it accordingly. So, George, objections, Georgia?
No conflicts.
None. Thank you. All right. None. And none here. So thank you all. The agenda. So it's time to adopt the agenda. So there was one thing, I think we put the executive session at 6. I think the only question I think Roger and I had was if we want to leave the order the way it is. If there's anything else on the agenda you have questions about, let's speak up. So if there are no questions, comments, or concerns, then we will take a motion when you're ready to move it.
I did have a question.
Yes.
You have, Mr. Chairman, you have closed executive at 6, and then at 10 you have end the public portion of the meeting. Is that duplicative or?
That, Mr. Chairman, board members, that was a drafting error on my part. Originally, I thought to put the closed executive session at the end, and then
Good question. Let's strike 10. Strike 10.
Yes.
Okay. And it would just be end meeting at that point. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Yes, motion to approve the
I'll make a motion to approve as modified.
motion by Roger, second by George. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we have an agenda. Thank you. Public comments for items not on the agenda. Any public comments here? I see our public shaking his head. And anybody online? Mr. Did you?
Hello.
Oh, okay. I see a hand up. Is that a bid? Fellow nerd. Okay, nobody online, so no public comment at this time. Meeting minutes. Approve the minutes of January 30. So all please take a look. Any questions, comments, or concerns, please speak up. Otherwise, when you're ready, we'll take a motion to approve the minutes of January 30.
I haven't.
Right.
Everything, I think. So on number, let's see. 3.5. We had previously approved that at like 3 or 4 meetings ago. But then we asked for additional information and got the additional information, so then it was more of a concurrence that we had the additional information we needed. We didn't actually vote.
Okay. So board action was concurrence, not action, so right, we just changed it to concurrence. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, with that change, I mean, when you're ready, we'll take it.
I'll move to approve 2/6/24 minutes with the change of 3.5.
Motion by Ken. Second by George, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Well, thank you. Resolution number 5.
Identifiable information. Mr. Chairman, board members, this is just the enactment of the resolution about personal information, an opportunity for you to sign this today.
Okay, and did
We did
have a comment that came through on that?
that's in addition to this, and I'll be happy to tell you about the comment if you'd like.
Should we just, let's discuss that before we actually take action.
Understood. We'll leave these with you all together.
Let's do that.
One other thing that we did have in relation to this, and part of the reason that we decided to embark on that resolution is we did get a member from the public who was asking about why their personal information was listed on our website, in showing when they applied for a water right application, had their name, their date, the fact that they'd applied, and the status of their water right application. This board's seen that website, and as far as I could understand it, wanted us to pursue having that type of information up and available so that people could look for their applications received, look for other applications received. So we had plenty of transparency. This was the first time anybody had ever asked us to, about the information and whether or not we could take the information down. The board directed me to interact with Haley. We did do some of that, and she provided information leading to the resolution that you discussed and considered at the last meeting. And it seemed like everybody was generally in agreement that, the approach to the resolution, which clarifies that we're a public agency, our records are public information. We have a requirement to maintain public information. We made some additional clarifications about what is private. You have the resolution in front of you, Mr. Chairman, but the PII, personal identifiable information, I believe it is further defined. Things that we do not solicit, that includes somebody's name, along with this secondary information like social security number or tribal number identifier. And those are things that we do not request on our forms intentionally. We do have contact information needed to interact with an applicant for the forms. Those records, just like any other water right application record in Montana, is accessible by the public. We did, take one step, which is that we, on our page where we publish the applications that are submitted and their status, we did scrub that off of the Google search engine, which reduces the ability to just people search a name. and have it pop up, but it doesn't, discourage anybody from coming directly to our website and looking for the information. So it's a filter without obstructing anybody who's really seeking that information, right? But a filter for just like the whole internet. And, a little bit of like a monkey with a rocket ship on me explaining that to you, Mr. Chairman, board members, but I think you get there. You get an idea. That said, also, we wanted to make sure we were in lockstep with the board's desires to have that information out publicly available. I did write a response to the person who'd asked to have their information removed, suggesting that, we did, think about the request. We do think that we have an obligation to have the information out there. We did at least scrub it from the Google search engine, to the best of our abilities. And then, that particular person asked if we consider some additional information citing some portion of the Montana Constitution. So I forwarded that along to you, see if you had any other direction. I did offer a suggestion that he specifically cited a reference that was, unless the state has compelling need, I believe it is. I don't have it right in front of me, apologies, but obviously there's some compelling considerations for water right applications on the reservation and transparency, which is why we have that page set up in the first place. That said, it does seem like I wanted to solicit the board's direction if you had it.
Yeah, and so Haley is aware of all that communication.
She was copied on that same email that I believe I sent to you and Roger
As well. So Haley, I see you're on. Any final comments before we take board action on this?
No further comments on anything regarding that. The board wants to have a conversation about those specific issues with the individual, then the preference would be to have that conversation outside of this meeting.
The resolution, as we're preparing to adopt it, is adequate then, in your opinion?
Yes.
So board members, you've heard the discussion, you heard from Haley, they've reviewed it. That's the recommendation. So if you're prepared to approve this, we'll take the motion. Unless there's any other questions.
Procedural question.
Yeah.
Do we need to approve you signing that? We already approved it, right?
Mr. Chairman, board members, I don't think you need to approve that. I just put it under board business so that everybody's here and part of that official enactment. We don't, I guess, have to have that on the agenda, but I didn't want to, remove anybody from the equation of the signing process.
Okay, well, given the nature of that, if we at least concur with that and make sure it's on the record.
Sure.
It is a resolution. Yeah, I would assume that normally you want to take action to approve resolutions, but if you just want to do it by concurrence.
I'm sorry, just to remove any confusion, you did actually take action to approve the resolution at the last board meeting. But when you do that, we have to take the document, remove draft, put a date on there, making changes that you might want to do, which is why sometimes when you approve something like a resolution, it comes back to you. And I've been putting them under board business for the signature step so that the board knows that it happened.
Done.
Yeah, again, Mr. Chairman, board members, if you don't want me to put those on.
No, I think it's worth it. I mean,
Okay.
I think a little bit of extra discussion is always worthy of having it on the record so that there's complete transparency. Thank you. Board notebook updates, OE staff.
members. Hope you all are enjoying your new 3-ring binders here. The only update that I have is there is a new board member compensation handout that has a really small change to the mileage rate for 2024. It went up by like 2 cents and something like that. So I'll have these added to your packets. I've already added them to Roger's, Ken's, and George's. I have George's here. I need yours.
If you just give me mine, mine's at home, so I'll just take it.
Perfect. And then Shane, eventually I'll need yours as well.
One of them hold in it, James, and they can just insert it directly.
Perfect, okay. And then I also added all the resolutions that you've enacted, including number 5, in your notebook at the end of my policy. So you should be up to date. You just let me know if there's anything else you want added to those findings at any time.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
Any board business, anything from any of the board members? George? Good.
I guess I do have one.
Yeah.
Just a general announcement. Ethan had asked me to get some information out to SKC students about the job announcements. Those went out on campus today. So.
You said a month for the. Yeah. Okay. All right, water engineer updates, please.
Mr. Chairman, board members, you have, your January and 2024 water right update report. Here.
Anybody online, we need to make sure this is showing.
Do you have anybody that can put what continue on?
No.
Just remind us of the following.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you know, we've got the date, these include all applications that have come through the office, just because we're still at a stage where we can provide that information on one page. And we've got the closeouts for 2022 and 2023. Those are green lines, and then 2024 will have just the January received applications. So far in January, which is complete, we received 13 total applications. We terminated 2 applications. And moved 9 along as correct so that they can move towards approval.
You show 9 and then you show 6.
We'll have to ask James about this.
Under January, it says 13, 2, and 9, and then it says 2024, 13, 2, and 6.
My apologies, those should both be 6. Yeah, those should both be 6.
Those should both be 6. All right, thank you. And then remind us what the terminated application is.
Mr. Chairman,
what an example of one would.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, board members, if somebody applies for new authorization to drill a new well, and they don't have a map that shows the essential information such as where the well is located, where the property is. There's some other kind of defect in the application. We would send out typically a letter, assuming that we have received the application fee and that we have the appropriate contact information so that we can send them. We will send out a letter that identifies the errors in the application that or omissions that need to be fixed, or we can review the application. We send that letter out within 30 days of having received the letter. If the application has defects in the first place, if they don't, we just go ahead and send out approval of Part A within 30 days. If we don't hear back from an applicant within 30 days, sometimes longer, then we would try to follow up, but if we can't, we don't have any resolution on the items, then that would be a cause for terminating an application, which is different from denying an application.
And then they could always go back and reapply.
Absolutely, yeah. In some circumstances, giving people a little opportunity to try to rejuvenate their application, but there's got to be compelling cause at that point once we send out a letter of termination.
And a withdrawn application is always by the applicant and they withdraw for a variety of reasons.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, comments? Yes, right.
So I have, I guess, a little concerned about the number of ones that get issued. We processed 411 and issued drilling permits essentially, but there's only 30 water rights that have been issued. There were none that are in all of those wells in 2022. So are we following up with people? And I guess like even that one guy that came to the meetings 3 or 4 times when we were just initiating, getting going. He was so wanting to get a water right that he obviously hasn't turned in a water right. So that seems like
Sure.
less than 10, like 8% success ratio.
Mr. Vice Chairman, board members, please give me a second to try to help explain these numbers. It is not a success ratio here. And in fact, we have not denied any water rights, just so you know. Things have either been resolved through termination, withdraws, or some other that would not actually have any, which is why we don't even have a column for that presently. So that said, what we're really lacking, why you don't see that issue, is because we don't have the database. The database is an instrumental, tool for creating the water right issuance. And absent the database, our staff has to go through this total bootstrapped method to create a new water right using a mail merge Excel file and manually creating a lot of the water right itself, as opposed to putting the date in that says issue date and then print, which is what happens if you have the database up and running. So then you might ask, well, why do we have any? We have the ones that are, anybody who's got a real compelling need for their water right to resolve something, we try to help them.
How many would you say have actually then filed for the complete water right that are sitting in the drawer?
Pending Part Bs. Between 50 and 70.
Your comment that it's about the database. So that, in my head, that means we've actually issued more, but because we can't count them. Then we're showing you here.
Mr. Chairman, board members, unless we created the actual water right and then signed it, we don't consider them to be issued. And there's not, when somebody files Part B with our office, we don't actually have a statutory timeline between receiving Part B and issuing them. You know, that said, it's obviously not our preference to have that sit, and I have tried pretty exhaustively here this last week to, you know, see what we can do to move things along. Because it also pertains to state-based registrations that we can't move. Now, board members, I did send you an update, you know, about the database and, you know, the current, you know, decision from the DRC is to, you know, not transfer any of the state rights or try to, you know, manage those until the full database project is complete. That's my understanding of what DRC is doing now. Obviously, jump in here if you want to ask me.
And I don't know if you can shed any more light on where we're at with the database. Sounds like we're just kind of plugging along, but I'm not, maybe either you or maybe someone by the next time we meet can kind of brief the board on where we're at with the database.
Yeah, we can do that.
Is there anything you can add to our information today?
I think that we've covered a lot of the major developments that we covered, like water reservation. You know, regarding water right, and understanding how that process will look in virus, and that's been with respect. And there has been a recent development with respect to with one of the staff members. They have a family member that's going through some health concerns, so I don't necessarily know if they're going to transfer that work to someone else, and that might prolong our timeline. I think collectively we've understood it's going to take a couple of months, but I can report back to you next week or next week.
Next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting with a more definitive timeline.
That would be my suggestion. Any comments? But yeah, Roger.
Couple comment questions. So one, from what I can tell from your email on the first, the thing is nearing completion. So Ben, if you could give us an update too on when they will start testing it. Maybe Kathy Schubert, when she's back on, could start to enter some of these things as a test trial or something to move them along. And so I guess that's just a suggestion I made.
Mr. Vice Chairman, board members, that is an excellent idea and what we already have in the works. You'd be happy to know Kathy's first day is tomorrow. So we've got things rolling pretty actively. So she'll be here tomorrow and Thursday. She's going to help us with some office coverage on Thursday as well. She, you know, is excited to do whatever she can on board's behalf to get that wireless project moved along. One of the things that was also mentioned in that email that I think would be a fundamental and important part is moving along with the MOU between the board and the OE and DNRC about access to the database.
Mr.
Georgia.
Well, for you and Ethan, I just had a quick question. I normally get a chance to check the website before popping over here, and I didn't check it this morning. Is this form on our website? Or is this just for us?
That's just for you,
Okay.
the whole applications are on the website, if anybody wants that information, they have it, but that's really just a snapshot. If we need to post those, we can.
No, that wasn't my point. I just thought if we have questions about issuance, I'm always worried about optics. And I would, if this were going up on the web, I'd want those disclaimers and explanations, so the public wasn't thinking we're behind on issuances or something, so. So that's, I prefer what you just said.
Sorry, and Chairman, board members, on a couple of these internal reports that we talk about here, I really just try to give you something that we can have the context of dialogue to work through it, you know, and again, if anybody ever needs anything, we've got it now. In terms of the public information we are actively posting, is James has done, how we're doing on our bylaws and resolutions, and we got that.
It's coming along.
It's coming along.
Almost up there.
We have developed substantially the page that has those records of everything. You know, that are the structural pieces, board operations, getting that up and posted. We don't think those need the disclaimers because they are official documents like the one that you just signed. Which would, you know, they go on there as soon as the signatures are dry and we get them scanned and, you know, because we do think that those items are things people should find when they're out there looking, or if, you know. Anyway.
Not to, Jordan, go ahead.
Well, again, I'm just looking at the numbers. If you look at the last 2 years of data, it looks like we're dropping by nearly 50% for each month of record that we can compare. Do you feel that heading into 2024, we're kind of leveling off at this point? Is that the trend that we're seeing here in terms of workload?
That is a solid question, and we're not sure. I actually was really surprised as I was reading this. I sort of saw this with you myself today, and working on other things, but I thought 13 seemed a little low for what we would have received given the amount of calls and traffic that we had. And so I don't know if the well drillers are behind or it's not. Yeah, right. There was a lot of folks trying to get projects off the ground and they, and we helped them. Or we're really, you know, done with the individual and shared, and people are waiting. Development, domestic allowances and permits and changes and other types of drawing rights, but, it's something we're trying to keep track of and trying to estimate what kind of volume we would have, because obviously it affects how we staff things.
Okay.
So for me, just a couple more. I don't want to get too far. I want to make this too far muddled, but you mentioned and asked James about the pending.
Yeah,
How did you say the pending?
Part Bs.
Bs, okay. So part Bs means they're at what stage?
Complete. Except for an issuance.
Except for an issue.
So that the
Okay.
applicant
So
has
they've
done.
been through all the process except for the issuance. So Haley, have you been following all of this?
Mr. Chair, are you referring to just kind of the status of all of these, or the process itself?
Well, mostly a little bit of both, but the status. So here's my question. So these individuals have got the application, been through the process, and it's just pending issuance. Does an individual have a right to have that issued now?
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna sit there until the database is done, and if it's gonna be 2 more months.
Good question.
and we continue to compile those, we're gonna be 100 or more by the time the database is done. Or how are we thinking about, especially the legal angle of those that are ready to be issued, but we can't issue?
Sure, that's a great question. And that's definitely something that we can look into with this meeting coming up with the office. As well, since we will be going into a little bit more of the procedures aspect of it. I don't have those lists that you all receive. I, tend to look every other day on the website at the application list page and just look at that, but it would be helpful to be copied on maybe some of those or receive a copy of what the pending issuances are.
If you don't mind, if you, maybe you and Ethan and James can get together and talk about that, or however is appropriate. That's my question, and I'm not sure how we address that, but am I making sense? And if that's a question that we need to answer, I think we should probably address that. Yeah, Roger?
No, I think you're right on, and I guess another concern that could follow them is if that water right didn't get issued and the property changed hands, that water right goes with the property. And so
Yeah, lots of potential complications, but I just wanted to, I'm thinking first about that issuance.
Yeah,
So if we're pending, if that's pending. If it. So maybe take a look at that. Maybe there's some interim way we can issue and create a record of that, so at least that individual has got what they've applied for. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, board members, just so there's no confusion, we have excellent records on the ones that we've issued. But the stumbling block is that it takes so long to issue one in an interim fashion, technology wise, that is a hurdle. Plus, that leaves a secondary backlog of, when you do go to put those into the water rights database, the water rights database wasn't exactly set up to receive already issued water rights. So, there's.
So that's what you guys can talk about.
Yeah,
Advise the
we'll talk
board,
about that.
advise the board on this. I'm not sure what else. I mean, that to me, when I look at this, that's the only thing jumps out to me. Anyway. All right, James, yes,
Chairman, I just wanted to quickly respond to the comment that Georgia made.
yes,
The report, I think some of the reason it seems like we're leveling off, but the workload is still high, is because that report doesn't capture the Part Bs that we receive. So we are still receiving a lot of notices of completion, and we have to follow up with those, and sometimes we have to send out deficiency letters for those as well. And the report doesn't reflect all of the completion.
Got it. Thank you.
could you add another column for like Part B submitted or something, just so we would have a feel then? That would at least give us a feel for how, what's been responsive and what's pending, yeah, how
Sure.
responsive applicants are getting.
And that column will represent the Part Bs that we received in that month, but it won't represent the month that the application goes to, because we've received Part Bs for things that are either a year old or 2 years old.
Yeah,
And so, we can add the column in for sure, but
Well-
the data won't be.
yeah, and that's apparent from what we even got here, because you issued 12 in September, but you only had 9. So same thing going on there.
Yeah.
if you add that and need to add a footnote, just to clarify that at the time, that'd be fine, just something that gives us a little more information. So, anything else? Anything else? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to hiring.
Mr. Chairman, board members, we have an active recruitment out there for 2 positions. One is either a compliance technician or a water rights specialist. And within different ranges of those job descriptions, the other position is for a hydrologist or a hydrogeologist. At present, that's gone out to through AWRA, through the University of Montana's job announcement serve. Exciting that it'll go out to SKC. That's on the tribe's website at present. Gave it to the state, not sure that, is the state got a spot they could put that for us? Is it just on the? I reached out to Arnie and we're working on that. Awesome, thank you. And we are closing in on having perpetual posting in the Missoulian, Charcusta. Valley Journal. One other one. Sorry, that escapes me. But,
Leader. Lake County.
Yes, he is Leader. Yep, thank you. And we're scratching our head about whether or not I think we should put it on Indeed. Given my instincts say no, but I also don't want to you know, if the pool's bad at the end, face the, like, I didn't do it scenario. So I thought, well, the board will all be here. Why don't you, as a board, tell me, would you like me to post those positions on Indeed? And just for context, to inform you of my intrepidation, is that when we did that previously, the applicants that we received through that particular job service, and maybe that was a one-time deal, but it was not, it did not prove to be a particularly fruitful endeavor, and in fact, consumed a fair amount of resources to work through it. But that said, I will, with a smile, put it on Indeed if this board so requests me to.
Where has the tribal program advertising back? Do you know?
Generally, it's Charcusta.
We've done some more regional and nationwide.
I don't see that too often, depending on the position.
I mean, what you've done looks fair to me. I mean, all I could do would be reach out to them to see what else they do. But short of that, I think this is adequate. And you might reach out to, I mean, if the state has got something they do, that would be good. But you might reach out to the tribal personnel office and say, what else? Just because they do it doesn't mean we have to, but it might give you an idea of what else they do when they look regionally and nationally. Because I just don't remember. But that's it.
I will absolutely do that, Mr. Chairman.
But what you've done looks fair. I mean, to me at this point, any other comments?
I was interested to see what Georgia had to say about Indeed, but what I recall was we got a bunch of phishing applicants, essentially. And so I'm not overly excited about going there, but I guess I wondered if we couldn't reach out a little more nationally, like to the, what's it called? The National Water Journal or something like that. I can give you a copy of that.
I'm absolutely, Mr. Vice Chairman, you point me in a direction, and we are happy to reach out to whoever. That was on my little list of notes to ask you. You mentioned some journal and some other outreach, and I've kind of exhausted mine.
Are these all costing?
Yeah, there's some money involved with this, not through the University of Montana system or through the AWRA, but the paper run stuff that'll post for a month on Saturdays or longer. We want,
AWRA.
yeah, and that would, it's set up right now to, start, considering priority applicants by March 1st.
So the AWRA, I was surprised that I got an email from Nancy Heisted last week or this week already that, she put that out on their website to all the members. So I thought that was great. That's a good start.
They are a great service and they have provided us some solid applicants going through that arrangement previously. So that was a high priority. Same with the Vicky Watson's stuff. And I've had several people already contact me. They knew, oh, you're hiring, it works out. So where do you get it?
Well, a comment, I'm not a fan of Indeed. I didn't think it yielded anything at all to answer your question about that. And James, if I could put you on the spot, how did you find out about the job when we flew it, the job that you have?
That was word of mouth, that was forwarded to me from a colleague.
Because if that works to get someone like you, I'm like, let's repeat that, please. So.
You have repeated those steps for what it's worth.
Well, given the other thing that's gonna help is the time frame. I mean, putting it out for 3 days, so. I mean, that helps word of mouth.
Well, Mr. Chairman, board members, I understood that I'm not gonna pursue an Indeed listing and that we're all gonna cumulatively own the responsibility for how that turns out, right?
I think you have consensus not to pursue Indeed.
Thank you for that correction.
All right. Anything else on hiring?
Well, I already told you that, Kathy starts tomorrow. That's a big, I'm very excited about that. It's nice to get some extra, help on things. So, perhaps that will lead to the board being less frustrated with our timelines. All right, and she's very excited and thrilled to be here. So that is also nice to have.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to budget.
Sure, Mr. Board members have got your standard budget reports that we're doing. And I have pass this down. And I have I expect to have a substantial budget report to you by tomorrow. As a business that realizes the ongoing balance that the board wanted. It has adjustments to retime our appropriation with the fiscal calendar year that takes into account, how to deal with, we have a little bit of a deficit that happens by, kind of retiming by 5 months, from September 1st, July 1st, start date to, January 1st start date. But, I think I've got all of that accounted for in vacancy savings and other measures. So I anticipate having that ready for you, sent to your mailboxes sometime tomorrow.
Okay, looking forward to that. I think I'm just. This looks like a good compilation of all expenses. How it relates to budget that's what's coming.
Yes, sir. That is, and I know it's a priority. It gives me anxiety trying to get it out the door to you. So there's no illusion from me about your direction on, getting that done.
And I think we always have to consider until we get to a certain point down the road there where I've worked with it for a while, that it's always a work in progress. So you're good, just get it and we can move on. All right. Any other questions on budget? Roger, Ken?
No,
I have, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Board members, tomorrow we will complete the heating repair. So, we're looking forward to getting that finalized and, wanted you to know that it's still something. It works right now, but it's in a bypass status and, I'm gonna be excited to have that resolved.
We'll be putting in a wood stove for you, if nothing else here pretty soon.
That may happen, you know, I might have to add that line item to the budget report that you get tomorrow.
What else do I have on it? Is by any chance, is Melissa online? She's not. Okay. So I had mentioned, I have not heard yet any response from the tribe and or state regarding our letter to them to initiate discussion about the building. They may just flat deny it, on one hand. On the other hand, I'd like to see us at least get them to agree to enter into some planning discussions now, so that when the time comes, we can push for funding for something. I've got some thoughts about how to approach it, but we need to have them in dialogue. I haven't heard anything from them yet, so.
Did you see my update that I sent you in that same email? So
Remind me if I did.
yeah, certainly, and I'm sorry if there's a lot to manage, but I did.
Email.
Thank you. I don't have it in front of me. That's handy. We did have some discussion about the building and DNRC's direction is to incorporate a scoping plan for FRWMB office building solution into its next executive process. So scoping, not a, it's just scoping. I don't want to overplay the state's hand or anything. And my understanding is that that scoping would be a 2-year process that probably doesn't start for a year, if not farther than a year.
Okay, well, I'd like us, and if you can pass on, but I'd like, if you're the board to consider that, I'd really like to get us into some dialogue with state and tribal folks together to see if we can urge it for so long. Because I think 2 years of scoping is probably not necessary if we get into some good process where we could actually have them sit down and scope with us, with an architect, a plan, come up with some actual budget figures for a possible building. What are our needs? Sit down with the staff, sit down with us, plan something out. And then obviously you're gonna say, well, where are we gonna do it? Well, that's where it'll be, what it looks like, are all things that need to be planned. Scoping would be good, but I think I'd like to see us get them to agree to starting that process right away.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Would we be able to partner with other tribal departments? Because I know Department of Water Resources are looking at a new building. And they're looking at
We're
putting
independent.
water management.
We're not state or tribe.
Okay,
And so what we do is end up being independent. So the way this is gonna work, so we're funded half by the state, half by the tribe.
okay.
So what we did is we sent a letter to the state of the tribe asking them to engage in some dialogue to initiate that process. And it sounds like there's some internal staff discussion on this, but I'd like us to get into some dialogue with them together to see if we can do this along.
Well, just an idea. I think we should have that scoping dialogue upstairs in July with them here. And maybe that timetable would get
Yeah.
expedited just a little bit, so
Or last month in here.
in here in winter, yeah.
Yeah,
Any
so,
part of my office is at your disposal.
I appreciate that, but,
It's our.
with your
other-
permission, I'll try to reach out and see if I can have some dialogue with both state tribal officials and, on my own, and, see if we can urge this along. Does that sound fair? If you have any other ideas, let me know. Yeah,
More questions. When you say scoping, you're talking traditional NEPA or NEPA type scoping.
I don't know that it's NEPA or NEPA, but it'll feel like it maybe.
I think I think start with defining the need. What is the need? I mean, what's the floor plan look like? What's the structure look like? What's the space look like? And then where? And then once you define where, then I think things like NEPA will kick in. And that's a process. It is probably a 2-year process, but I'd like to see a lot of that done enough to the point where by the time we get to the next legislative session, they're not saying, well, we gotta wait 2 more years, so there's 4 or 5 years down the road before. It'd be nice to urge this along a little more. I think, my thinking anyway. You have other thoughts about that, and please share them, but that's what I'm thinking. Since the letter's out there, I'd like to reach out to them and see if we can put something. So maybe a working group then at that point, put them to urge that.
And, Mr. Chairman, board members, for what it's worth, not to put words in the state's mouth, but they did, feel that your letter did an adequate job of explaining the situation. And so, your message was read, at least heard, and I didn't get any feedback on how something else, articulated. So you're really starting to back up for it.
Thank you. All right. I will do that. Anything else on budget stuff? Any other questions on budget? All right. Number 5, complaint process documents.
Mr. Chairman, board members, if you will, I'm gonna kind of offer a reminder on why this is on your agenda.
Please.
All right, at our last meeting, we briefly touched on the complaint procedure, where we were at in the complaint procedures. I did not have those documents queued up for you. And, I was instead, suggesting you wait until my office has gone through our hearings, procedures, with legal counsel. As a reminder, James and I are going to work on that in Missoula with Haley this Thursday on the 8th. I do believe at that meeting, I kept saying the 7th, but I knew what I meant. It was on Thursday of this week. But that said, board wanted to have the close to final documents in their hand. And so you have 4 documents in your hand. One would be the procedure itself. And as a reminder, and it's written into the header, this is like written as a standalone portion of the WP&P. I do believe the board could, decide to enact this, and it could be an operational. We would be able to go forward if you wanted to kick this out the door in advance of some other WP&P action. Just for that context, that is really the board's prerogative. We also have a draft notice of water use complaint. Remind the board that upon receiving a formal complaint, we have strict requirements to immediately send a notice to the person who filed the complaint and the person, who was being complained about, to let them know that there's a complaint filed. And then we start moving forward towards, setting a hearing and so forth. Then you have two other, documents. There's an informal water use complaint and a formal water use complaint form. As a reminder, you know, we wanted to have something equivalent to what the state complaint system is, which is and more like this informal 609F has the same number. But then the board also wanted to have, because of the hearing requirements and the other I'll say mandatory structure set forth in the ordinance, something that had a fee, that had some additional you know, formality to it that ties it to the ordinance, and that's what your 610F form is. It currently has a filing fee of $55. That's something that this board will need to make an ultimate decision about, along with any of the other elements of the draft that you like or do not like. And we will do our best to enact that. And then this is on your agenda today, Mr. Chairman, board members, so that it does solicit possible action, which is how this board requested this item to be listed on today's agenda. I hope that we got close to achieving that. The board's desires on that, with
a couple of reminders. So, we did or did not, look, or will need to put this out for.
that is an excellent thing that I should have covered in my briefing, Mr. Chairman, board members. We did put this out for a 15-day public comment. We did not receive any comments. I'm looking back to verify my recollection with Mr. Freights back there. But in general, yeah, we didn't see any comments. The folks who were interested parties that we did see giving some testimony here in this office have been, I send out an informational email before all of our meetings to people on a listserv if they're interested. And I've kept those specific people in that service, and they're just waiting right now.
So what went up? Just the narrative or the forms as well?
Just the narrative. Your forms, Mr. Chairman, board members, have not been something that we've sent for a multi-day notice. We believe that is reserved for water policies.
That's fine. I was just curious.
Okay.
I want to make sure I knew.
And
So,
nothing keeps us from doing it though, Mr. Chairman, if this board ever wants something to go out for longer notice.
no, just wanted to make sure we're clear. Questions, comments on the board? You said something earlier. You said you and James are going to be looking at daily and Missoula, and what are you looking at?
Mr. Chairman, board members, this office is charged with doing our own hearings and appeals. Before an appeal makes its way to the board, it would typically be appealed through my office. So my office makes a decision. The decision might not be favorable or desirable from an applicant because of a modification or a denial or something like that. Then if the applicant, they want to appeal the decision, they first appeal with our office. So we have the responsibility to hold hearings on our own decisions before things make it to you. I don't see Haley's hand up, so I didn't say anything wrong, I guess.
It's a planning meeting.
Well,
Planning
Mr. Chairman,
training meeting you're having.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, you know how you went through that appeals
Yeah.
procedures for your your pellet documents, identical to that.
Okay, and then we are still considering a mock hearing.
Mr. Chairman, board members, you are scheduled for February the 20th with your legal counsel. I do not believe I am a part of that meeting. Is that Haley, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This would again be probably a mixed meeting. So part of it will be closed, like we did before, to discuss, to give legal advice, and legal strategy. And then the other portion would be open when we actually do our mock, most likely.
Okay, so do we need to wait for your meeting in Missoula and the mock hearing before we approve this, or are you and Ethan ready for us to approve this?
So I mean, I may be ready. However, you know, I would let that decision fall with Ethan in his office, since he'll have to be pulling most of the weight on those procedures.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I have encouraged you to wait till we get through our hearings and appeals procedures. I have also offered to you that I will wing it. If you're just motivated to get it out there, but that it will immediately, I'll have at least to deal with, you know, in very short order.
If we wait, so we'd be waiting possibly till the next meeting, so that give you time to have this, your meeting in Missoula? Is that
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, I think that we only have the sorry, I lost mine. 27th is on the list, which I do understand, not everybody's 100% available for sure on the 27th at last check, but that if it was left to me, I would try to encourage that you pause on the complaints till we can get that training, get our documents in order, get another employee here in the office. You know, it gives me a little better chance
we just need your
for
recommendation,
success.
so we're close, we just need to wait for these key things to fall in place.
Yep.
So I would say board is amenable, and kind of wait until, otherwise you've got an opportunity to take a look at this, and when you're ready, we'll trigger. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but for me, the 27th is not gonna work, so.
Okay.
So on the 20th was appeals, that's the training Haley was talking about?
That training is for you on your appeal process. The training from Haley on the 8th is for James and I for our office.
20th is a mock hearing.
So where I was going with that is, that'll probably take a couple hours, but maybe we could, I'm not available the 27th either. I don't know if we could just add a couple hours to the meeting on the 20th to incorporate some of this other stuff. If other board members were available.
To make it a meeting on the 20th?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So jumping ahead just a little, so
Yeah.
20th. You guys, so what I'm hearing is proposed, regular meeting plus time for this mock hearing, to do it all in one day. On the 20th. George is trying to figure out her class schedule for 6 classes.
Well, I also want to be sensitive to staff that have to commute
Yeah.
to Missoula if we stay after hours. That's because I'm assuming that would be past 4 o'clock, correct? It would go into like 6 o'clock. If we had a normal, I don't know how long the mock hearing is going to take. So if we had a meeting on top of that, does that put our staff heading to Missoula late?
It's all fine, and I don't know what the weather is.
If we could, you know, the meeting portion could be tailored to, there's a couple, there's 1 or 2 specific items.
Gotcha.
To just this.
Okay.
We don't have to,
Okay,
And a couple other little things, maybe.
that would just formalize it so we could take action if we want to. So you will
That
have
worked for
had
me.
your planning session doing that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and, we're still,
We put them as.
We don't, our staff.
we're not sure what we're doing yet, so I'm in a little bit of it. You guys are ahead of me on your appeals.
So tentatively, that would be an idea. Their meeting on the 8th, just meeting on the 20th. So we do the mock hearing and then we have our regular meeting, a regular meeting. On that day, so maybe. Mock hearing. Haley. You're thinking what? Minimum 2 hours, maximum what?
I think we could probably reserve like a 3-hour space, time frame. We wanted to go through, certain questions with the procedures, any sort of, legal advice questions that you might have, during that time, and then actually run through something, and it would be where, we could stop the mock and go through scenarios, if that was necessary as well. It's supposed to be just a learning experience, for everybody too, if they have never been through a legal proceeding before.
So. Just thinking about here, before we get to that, after your planning session, if you flag us. And we can set these times and days. You flag us ahead of time and say. Our discussion is right on, we're ready to go. Approve it, then we can approve it. If you by then say you aren't ready, then we can do our mock hearing and then we don't have to approve anything. We can just have a very short meeting and we'll run at that point. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Mr. Chairman, board members, the 5th might be an option, and some of what I think would drive our next steps is how far this body gets in the WP&P process today, because that might be another factor on what happens at the next meeting, I guess. For the board. The other thing I was gonna ask Haley, you mentioned some public portion of the meeting on the 20th. Is that? For me, I'd wanna, it'd be nice to know if that was for sure needed, because folks who are interested in these topics would, prefer to have probably full open meeting, but I don't mean that, I'm not suggesting that you open your meeting on the 20th, but rather most of it needs to be closed. Maybe handle the open meeting business on a different day. I hope that does a better job of what I was butchering there a second ago.
That's fine. I was saying it more so if there was any sort of, pre-business, that needed to be handled, that portion needs to be open. So just a reminder that, anything that's not pertaining to legal advice or legal strategy needs to be open. The portions that I have planned, all involve legal advice or legal strategy, so it would need to be closed.
And did you feel like that was like 4 hours of meeting?
I think I just mentioned 3, if it needed to be shorter. 4 would be great. Just in case we run into any snafus or, lingering questions.
So it's the 5th, if we held off, I know I'm jumping in here, Haley, thank you. If we held off till the 5th for a regular meeting to finalize this. Will that work for you?
Yeah, that works for me, and I think it might make it easier to have some cleaner meetings. You can have
So you have
a
your
fully
meeting,
closed
mock
meeting
hearing,
on the 20th,
and then see where we're at, and then on the 5th, we'll have our regular meeting. Does that work for you? Roger?
Yeah, I'll be participating via teleconference then. I think.
You
Yeah.
suggested the fifth, I mean, we were targeting Tuesdays, is there?
I took the next Tuesday after 27th.
Yeah, is there another day that week that's better for you?
No, I'm out in month of March.
Okay,
And I've got a conflict on the fifth, but let me see if I can resolve it internally before I say no.
okay,
We'll double check. You're good on it? On fifth?
I have no life. I couldn't be here on the fifth, so,
George?
yeah.
For you? Thank you.
so tentatively,
Tentative
until we hear, until we hear from Ken.
and, you know,
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, can I just make a quick clarification comment?
Yeah,
So the meeting that's being held on the eighth, with Ethan and James, it is a workshopping session, so no decisions will be made, at all. Actually, all of the discussions that we'll have will actually come before the board, to be decided on. So whatever the next regular meeting is, it would be advisable to have most of the board members present for that meeting.
yeah, that makes sense. So we'll see what Ken comes up with. We'll go from there. And you can communicate with us, Ethan, by email, so we'll kind of figure out our next meeting date. Okay, that jumped us ahead a bit here in terms of our discussion, but so at this, yeah,
I wouldn't have, I didn't interrupt you, but I was checking.
so at this point, all of item number 5 is no action today. That's the way I hear it, so yes? Yeah, okay.
For what it's worth, I do think you should just at least still go through the public comment, just because it is on the agenda. For good.
I can do that, for any public to have comment. Public comment, then, this item we were discussing, complaint process, and documents. Anybody online? Online to have any public comment, so.
Appreciate it.
All right. Roger.
So our next session is closed, but before we do that, I just wanted to say that we do have a presentation from Ron Warren with Rocky Mountain Surveyors after our executive session, and it's going to be pretty informative on the subdivision review process. So if there's anybody in the public that's interested in that, you know, when we resume, you can be an honor. So it'll be educational and informative.
So we'll do an executive session and then we'll come back into that regular session. Is the way we're gonna work, so. With that, we have an executive session of the board plan for personnel matters, a discussion with just board members. So Haley, I see you, did you have something? Your smiling face popped up on the screen, so I just want to make sure. All
No,
right,
all good.
we'll break for executive session, so. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Thank you for your patience. Anybody online who was there, everybody here in the audience, thank you for your patience. So for our next item, we have a continued water policy procedures working session. We have a guest speaker and the water engineer and legal, and I will turn it over briefly to Roger.
Okay, so I guess before we embark on the some of this domestic development allowance, thought it'd be good to have a little educational information background on how engineers and surveyors approach these developments and what's required and what the state law allows. Ron Warren is from Rocky Mountain Surveyors. He's out of Plains, Montana, so he works a fair amount on the reservation. So, he's been doing this for, I don't know, 30 years.
Yeah, I just kind of lead in here. So, yeah, I bought Rocky Mountain Surveyors in 1996 and I got my license, but I bought the company from my dad. I started surveying from my dad when I was 12 years old. I went to college at Montana Tech. I got my degree in geophysical engineering. My sophomore year, I started working for Sarco as an engineer for Sarco, and I worked for them for 15 years. I moved all over the country. I ended up in Tennessee. In 96, that's when my oldest boy was starting school, and my wife and I decided we wanted to come back to Montana and be in a rural town again. And we were both born and raised in Montana. So back we came to Plains, Montana, and took over Rocky Mountain Surveyors, and have been surveying ever since. So laws change drastically all the time. Every legislative session we get barraged with. This last session we had almost 60 different bills that affected land surveyors. Trying to keep up with the rules and regulations is hard. So when we do a subdivision, we do two parts. We do Montana Subdivision Planning Act, which is it's basically health and public safety in subdivisions. Do you have access? Do you own the property? You know, how are you breaking it up? That's county review of a subdivision. But the county review is all governed by Montana Code Annotated and the administrative rules of Montana. So in 1972, they did the Montana Subdivision and Plating Act. And basically the state wrote a gray book, what they called it, which was the model subdivision regulations for the state of Montana. And they gave that up to the counties, and the counties all called it the gray book. They adopted it, but then they changed it. They started adapting those regulations to fit their county, but they couldn't be more stringent than what the state laws and regulations were. So they had to pretty much follow the state guide. So that's the Subdivision and Plating Act. So that's the first thing we do is when somebody calls me in Hot Springs, Montana, and wants to split up a 40, they say, we want to do 8 lots, 5 acre parcels.
You said they couldn't be more stringent. Could they be less stringent?
It could be less stringent.
Wow, I had that question too.
So, so they'll call me up and say they want to do 8 5-acre parcels out of a 40. And the first thing I'm going to do is figure out how we're going to lay out those parcels. And I have to kind of look for the end result and say, how are we going to do sanitation? How are we going to do water? Because that's the second phase of the subdivision, is the sanitation subdivision. The map is where we do the wells and the water. For me, that's the first thing I do. I go out on a piece of property and I say, where am I going to put the drain field and where am I going to put the well? I can build anywhere. I can build on bedrock, but you can only put a drain field in certain areas and you can only drill. So I look at that up front and I get my build sites first, and then I figure out where I can do lot lines. And then I tell my client what they tell you do 4 cans, not 8 5s. Once we get preliminary approval from the county, that's when we start on the DEQ. We have to have in our submittal to the county, we have to show them that we're going to put sewer and water on parcels to show them we have some idea in it work. They want to see that, they want to talk about it, but they aren't reviewing it. So once we get preliminary approval from the county, that's when we submit to DEQ. One of the prerequisites of the county is that we have to get DEQ approval before we can file our plats. So we go to DEQ. No, in 2017, they changed the rules on us and they said, hey, before we'll look at your application, not only do you have to have DEQ or county approval, you also have to have a letter from DNRC saying you can get a waterway.
So when you say they changed the rules, is it the statutes or the administrative rules that changed?
I think it's in their circulars. So then the administrative rules tells them how to enforce the rules. But they said, you know, before we give you approval for a subdivision and say, yeah, you can do these 12 lots and here's where you can do your well and your drain field. We want a letter from DNRC saying you can even drill a well on the property. So include that letter. Shortly afterwards, here comes Flathead Reservation Water Management Board, which is almost the same process. We got the DNRC process down. We only had a couple of years to work on it. Now we have to do applications on the reservation. That's a slightly different way. With DNRC, we know I can take a client, if he's got 80 acres, I can do a 5 lot subdivision out of his property by 5 acre parcels. And I can get a 10 acre water right on that area that I'm subdividing. If the remainder is greater than 20 acres, I can get another 10 acre out or water right if I do a second phase out of that 80. So we know what we're up against there, you know, so when we started doing the DNRC letter, we started doing phased subdivisions. You know, you got 10 acre feet to work with. If I split an 80 acre parcel into 20 lots, I only get 1/20 of that 10 acre feet for each lot. But if I do 4 lots out and say 4 or 5 acre parcels, that's 20 acres out of the 80. I know when I go back in there on the 60 and do another phase, I'm gonna get another 10 acre feet to split up between those spreads. As long as the remainder was greater than 20 acres. And I think part of what your process is leading to is you may be looking at 40 acres instead of 20 acres. I think that restricts it a lot. Right? I don't know, Roger could kind of go over it, but in the Hot Springs area, you get 11 inches of rainfall per year on average. That's about it. On a 5 acre parcel, that's just under, I believe it's just under 5 acre feet. Yeah, 4.6 acre feet per 5 acre parcel. So if you're restricting it to 40 acres that you're going to develop, and you're only gonna let 3 wells per the 40 acres, that's not very much water, and those are large tracts. It kind of prices out the young kids that are trying to start out in life, you know, so. I don't know, I brought some samples on the flash drive that I bought. There's been a lot of 20 acre subdivisions on the reservation around the Hot Springs area. And it's because you don't have to go through DEQ. It takes that out. All you gotta do is get county approval. There's no DEQ because DEQ doesn't review anything over 20 acres in size. So we as a surveyor aren't required to go get a letter ahead of time because we're not, it's DEQ that drives us to get the letter from either the Flathead Reservation Management or DNRC. So there's a lot of tracts that are being created that are just over 20, and that's, to me, that's a waste of land. People are building a house on a little half-acre parcel. They got 20, but they can't really do anything with it because they don't have a lot of water to farm it, agriculture, whatever. So it turns into a weed patch and kind of a bad deal. But yet you can't divide that into a bunch of 2 acre tracts either because you're never getting water rights for it right now, the way it's set up. I go pretty fast. There's a lot of stuff. So if you guys have questions.
I have a question. This is new for me. I'm more familiar with surface water. I'm hearing 2 things, and maybe I'm not hearing you correctly, but it sounds like there's not a lot of water in Hot Springs, but you want smaller lot sizes? Did I hear that correctly? Because if there's not a lot of water, maybe we shouldn't be having smaller lot sizes, right? And we're in a climate uncertain future. Yeah, I'm not convinced we're gonna have more water in the future. I'm pretty convinced we're gonna have less. So.
I guess for a single family residential lot, domestic use only, you're only using 0.29 acre
Okay.
for a house. The lawn and garden is what uses your water out.
Okay.
We're already kind of using that for the land. A lot of it's coming from surface water and irrigation water rights, which is a whole other issue on reservation because there is a really good irrigation system in place. And most of the time when you're splitting up at 40, there's already a surface irrigation water right on it. And whether you split that up between the lots, how you handle that and use it. We're really for subdivision, we're just looking at the domestic, the lawn and garden.
Okay.
I haven't seen in my lifetime in the Hot Springs area where one well is ever taken away from another well. There, that density isn't there. And you guys study it more, you got a bunch of hydrologists that. I haven't seen that impact. You'll see it from a drought year to a wet year. You'll see those cycles of drought that come through, and you'll see water levels will change a little bit in wells, but it's cyclical and it comes back. We've seen it in Sanders County over by Plains. We saw it through a little period about 12 years ago. We saw a lot of people had to lower their pumps in their wells, but it was that region of the entire county that they had to do it. And then we had a recovery where and it has gone back down since. So none of that was from the demand of the adjoining wells, that the whole area is a whole site. I don't know if that's answering your question. I just.
Well, it almost reinforces my concern in the sense that I get what you're saying, that watering ground is gonna be a lot more water than use in a home. But if you haven't seen an individual well dropping the neighbor's well, but you've seen general trends caused by drought lower the water table, all of the indicators show that we're gonna see more drought lowering the water table. I haven't seen any data indicating water tables are coming up, especially in hot springs. So an increase in density of any kind in homes, and believe me, I get the fact that we want our young people to have a home. I've got a 27-year-old daughter who has definitely been impacted by the housing crisis. I hear that. I'm just really concerned about build out and density, especially in areas where, well, that are very dry already, drier than other parts of the reservation. So that's my concern. I just want to make sure if anybody buys a home or develops a home this year in 2024, that in 2064, when they turn the tap on, they still got water. That's my concern.
Some of your examples, maybe we can look at some of your examples, but some of your examples where you talk about like in the hot springs area, I'm assuming you're describing, because part of what we're also looking at is trying to get people connected to existing infrastructure when they're within those areas. I mean, you're talking about outside of this infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Hot Springs, right next to Hot Springs, you have the Campbellstown site, which has over 400 individual lots in it, and they're not into a public water supply. Little tiny 8-acre parcels. They're out there. And they're getting water every way they can. There's very few wells in those 400 parcels that are there.
Interesting.
Lone Pine Town site, you got another 130 parcels. Lots in Lone Pine, there's probably 3 wells in that town site right now. You know, and I'm doing a project there where I had a client buy 4 lots in one block and 4 lots in another block. And we're taking those 4 lots and aggregating into 2. And aggregating these 4 lots into 2, and then they'll put a shared well in for each of those 2 lots. Because the wells are deep, they're expensive, at $70 a foot, you're going 300 feet plus. So we're doing a shared drain field, sand, because you're on clay too, so the septic systems are really expensive. So we're trying to aggregate those 8 lots into 4 total lots at the end, with 2 wells that are shared between 2 living units and 2 drain fields that are shared to get the cost of parcel down to something that's affordable. And that's one of the projects I have a sample that we submitted. One of those 4 lot parcels has well already and a water right on it. So once we get the aggregation file reported to the county, then we'll file a shared well agreement and split the water right between the 2 parcels. The other one where we have to drill a well, we're being asked to do the shared well agreement upfront, notarize that the county, and I have a copy of that letter. And we haven't even drilled the well yet. You don't even know if we can get water on that parcel. And You can't really do a shared well agreement. I know we got one legal, but trying to do an easement from yourself to yourself isn't an effective thought. I don't think it's. You really can't deed an easement from yourself to yourself. So once the parcel sells,
You could deed an easement from yourself to a trust, that you're the trustee.
something, but you can't, you have to have some entity to get to. So, you know, the owner hires us to aggregate the 4 lots into 2 lots, and then this one. We've got an application in to get permission to drill a well and file for a water right. And then we'll drill the well, and then we would do the shared well agreement when he sells one of the parcels off. That would be our intent, but we're being asked now to do that all up front before we can get any kind of a letter that we can get a drill a well or get a well right. But that's a case where we're taking 4 existing lots and combining them into 2 lots, make it more affordable and more usable. And one of those parcels had 4 different trailer houses on it. It's pretty poor living conditions, so we removed all that and put that on the start from scratch. But those are the kind of projects, I mean, I work on a big range of projects that.
Ron, I was curious to see your examples when you maybe pull those up.
Do the, what are the 2 labels of the? Lone Pine. Do the Lone Pine one first, because that's what I was just talking about. That's a letter where I have to go to the courthouse and get an notarized, recorded shared well agreement before we can proceed with our application. And then this is the Lone Pine Town site.
Can you go back to that? So is that shared well issue you're dealing with there, is that, you said from the county, is that the county?
So we did an application, Flathead Water Management
So
Board,
this is
and that's
ours.
one of the conditions.
This is ours, okay, that's the only place I'm aware of, but you said county, I didn't.
But this has to be filed with the county. They're asking me to get a notarized shared well agreement, file it with the county before we can proceed with our application.
So is this similar to what DEQ is that, I mean, it's similar kind of idea to DEQ, is that say, they're asking for confirmation that they can actually get it before they actually proceed?
Mr. Chairman, board members, the ordinance is super clear on shared wells, that they need to include a shared well agreement. In conversations with our lawyers indicated that a shared well agreement is something that will be registered with the county and a pertinent to land. We were under the impression that you can, in fact, set up that type of long-term agreement with yourself that should that parcel be split in the future, that there'll be a sharing of that. And the reason that the ordinance included that language, and one of the biggest things that we deal with here in our office is people who are on a shared well, where there's not a shared well agreement. It causes a huge amount of frustration. That was not unique to this reservation. DNRC sees that as pretty consistent across the entire state, which is why that was actually a push from the Montana DNRC to embed that requirement into the shared well, conditions in the ordinance. So does that help, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the county itself, the county's requiring it?
No, Mr. Chairman,
No, we're requiring it, but the county is asking it that they get evidence of that they can have a shared.
no, Mr. Chairman, sorry if I didn't do a very good job explaining things. It is our determination that a shared well agreement is an agreement that is executed in the county. So that it's part of the record through the county system. It's not, I don't know what the county requires or not. I'm not gonna say that, but for us, looking at a shared well agreement, we would think that is something that needs to be executed with the county. So it's on record. stamped and part of the public record as pertinent to that land.
Go outside of the reservation, we do a subdivision, we do shared wells. DEQ requires that we put a sample shared well agreement in with our application to DEQ. And then that is in as a sample that the DEQ final approval for the subdivision. That doesn't get executed until you sell those lots out of the sale.
You say sample, you mean draft? Sample, agreement?
The sample shared well agreement.
So you mean a draft?
Yeah, yes, right.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
So, but then you still have to go through DEQ when you're on the reservation.
Yes. So we would do the same thing if we're promoting. Now, like on these lots at Lone Pine, say they're existing lots, we aren't subdividing. We're aggregating, so we're not going to go through subdivision review, and the aggregation plat is exempt from subdivision review at the county level. So I'm doing one of those 4 lots, I'm gonna aggregate those 4 lots into 2 lots, there's already a well on that. Block 2 of the town site of those 4 lots, and then when my client sells the amended second parcel, he would file a shared well agreement with FRWMB. On the other 4 lots aggregating, there is not a well there yet, so that's when it'll be on the application. Water management. And you know, we'll do it, we'll file a shared well agreement, but it's between the owner and himself. And then that has to be transferred to the buyers or else it doesn't do it, but it'll go with the lot too. Between the sellers. I even talked to him, I said, maybe we'll put your wife's name on the parcels and your name on the other, so we can do the shared agreement between the wife and the husband. But we're creating a bunch of deeds that are just going to be dissolved as soon as they sell that person lot, which is their. So there's some costs there that's really.
So it seems kind of premature then to have to file a shared well agreement before the lot is sold, because 1, you're filing an easement. It's really an illegal easement. And 2, it may not even be a shared well, because if they don't sell the lot, then it's nobody's gonna share it out.
And when you look at the Lone Pine Town site, those lots have been. Dates on the plat, it's 80 to 100 years, they've been there for a long time. And there's only like 6 permanent houses out in that town site.
You want to rotate that, James? Can you rotate it?
And no community system.
None.
So I know when you said 100 years old, presumably there was at least some anticipation there would eventually be a community system. There isn't.
No, the interesting part is the 4 lots that are the southernmost, the bottom ones there. We had spigots all over that property. That's the one that had 4 individual living units on it. Pretty sad conditions. We filled 2 complete dumpsters. They had to go to Missoula, correct? There's water spigots out there. We had to trace those lines. They came from the Lone Pine Community Center that's across the Lone Pine Road. And
No
they
way.
run water lines down there, buried it, I don't know, 40 years ago. So we had to track that water and figure out where the heck it was coming from.
Shut them off.
Wow.
So Ethan, I need to probably go back and really take a hard look at what it says in the ordinance, but when you said that we have to, so just clarify, we require shared well agreement, and you're saying we're also required to file with the county?
No, Mr. Chairman, so the ordinance calls for a shared well agreement. And then, in conversations with our legal counsel, they have determined that a shared well agreement is something that will be executed with the county. We have, certainly on occasions, been fine to accept a shared well agreement at the Part B filing, which would be, because there's a Part A filing where you get permission to drill the well, and then there's a Part B filing. And so what we'll do sometimes is accept a draft of what the shared well agreement is, and then the issuance for the permission to go drill the well, assuming that we're talking about a well that doesn't exist, would have written into that condition that they provide an executed version of the drafted shared well agreement. But we are bound by the law on the ordinance side, so that's why we're trying to.
It's creating that shared well agreement, but filing with the county, that you're saying our attorneys have decided we have to file with the county.
That is typically how shared well agreements are handled, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not following you, sorry. County executes. Right?
You just filing it, yeah.
County executes, okay?
Okay.
Then how do we get to us?
The applicant would give it to us,
Okay, and then what would you do with it?
copy of it, it goes in the file. Okay. And, and provides us the ability to issue water.
Okay. So we really don't have anything to do with it other than put it in our file.
We require it,
Okay,
and then we put it in our file,
Okay.
and we're required to require
okay,
it. Yep.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for asking.
So what he's got up right now is the aggregation plat that we're doing. We're taking the 2 pairs of lots and aggregating them. So we're trimming 4 lots into 2 lots. And then the next page is our layout, which shows where the shared drain field will be and where the shared well will be. Another complication that you can't really see from this is the streets here in Lone Pine Town site are 80 foot. When we drill a new well, the well isolation zone has to stay on your property. It can go in the public roadways. So I'm using the whole entire 80 feet of the public roadway for my well isolation zone to keep that thing so that I have room on the lot to put a replacement drain field there. And this is a sand mountain septic system for the 2 homes. And we dug up and we verified that there was 3 cesspool septic systems on this property prior to us starting on this project. And water line coming from the Lone Pine Community Center, a little over.
You've got some stories to tell, I think.
So, and this is the one that we had the application in with the Flathead Water Management Board to get permission to drill a well and right. And there are no houses. The houses, there's 1 garage on the property at this point is the only structure that standing is worth saving. Go ahead and go to the next one. The next one's the next block over block 2. Again, we're aggregating 4 lots into 2 lots. You can go to the next slide. This parcel has an existing well and an existing water right, so I'm not doing an application. But what we will do is we'll do a shared well agreement prior to selling one of the 2 parcels. And then we'll divide up the water right.
So we're sort of like maybe in the same boat Ken is trying to wrap my head around. So we're requiring an ordinance, the shared well agreement. What's the timing of that? When is that required?
Mr. Chairman, board members, it depends on whether or not the parcel lines are already in effect.
So when we file water rights through you guys, with DNRC, you can't file a water right till you put the water in beneficial use.
That's correct. Yes.
So this parcel already has a beneficial use water right. It's got 1 house, the existing structure that's shown there. And then we'll have to change that water right and we shared well agreement with the other parcel.
Okay, what do you mean by change the water right?
Well, there's a water right. It's to the landowner, I guess it's on lot 6 is what the water right. I'd have to really look at that because this has got one GWIC number, but the parcels are still separate lots.
Okay,
I guess that the water right's probably been assigned to parcel 6.
the reason I'm asking on what you mean by change, is that there's. The change of water rights is a pretty involved process. You have to have a full adverse effects analysis, even if it's an allowance. What often happens is people will modify it by withdrawing the old right and applying for something new that matches what they're really trying to do. Those are your kind of like shooting from the hip and not knowing, you know, the detail about this policy. Those are the two options you have to navigate, right? From what I think you're saying, but again, I would want to know more details about things.
So anyway, next slide. That, you can keep going. That was just going there. Here's the Camas Town site, 400 lots. I'm guessing there's probably. There's probably 15 or 20 wells out there maybe total. There's a lot of people living on bare lots without wells. In that, there's been talk about adding this to the town of Hot Springs, but that's a pretty major undertaking.
And all those parcels already exist?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the recorded town site plat. That town site existed before the Hot Springs town site.
Sure, and just to help the board members, so in a situation where the parcels are already set, that all happened before our time, and they're not under affiliated ownership. You remember the long discussion we've had about affiliated ownership? You know, then if somebody wanted to put in, you know, up to 3 individual or, you know, one development domestic allowance on one of those lots, then, you know, that's a done deal for, as far as we're concerned. If they do share, you know, they would have to have a shared well agreement that specify what, up to 2, not more than 3, parcels are sharing the individual well, and then that would have to be in a shared well agreement, which, you know, we've determined is something that you would have to file with county.
I'm familiar with these. But frankly, never. Everything all right out there? Never pinpointed this problem. But these exist all over the red. And they exist around Flathead Lake.
There's a town site. Most of it's tribal.
Well, that was my next point, is that for how much of this is all in fee, and is any of it in trust?
I'd have to look, at Cadastral to find that out.
And I don't want to get too far afield here, but if you've got a shared well situation and it's in trust, where are you filing?
Mr. Chairman, board members, for the sake of our discussion here, I was focused on fee lands.
Yeah,
The trust, things in the tribal trust are certainly different situation, and that is in a, I'll call it yet to be determined.
still
How
coming.
that shared well agreement needs to be, but I would generally assume that would be something involving either the tribe water right office or the tribe land office.
While we are starting to have to consider how to address this, in my mind, it points to the fact that the compact and the ordinance didn't consider this. And I would just keep in the back of your mind, think that it might be worthy of their state and tribe consideration to go back to look at that situation like this. Now, you're gonna end up with subdivisions in other places, new ones that are being developed. Right?
It's a lot harder to get them developed now, because we gotta have a letter up front saying we can do a water rate on each one of those lots. This would never happen in today's.
I get that, but the concept is there. This already exists. So how do we deal with that? Okay,
I know I looked at the Lone Pine this morning, and that Lone Pine, about a third of the lots are in trust, or 2/3 are private, and I didn't know the ratio.
yeah, that's, I mean, we could figure it out.
It's a mix.
I know that
Wow.
that is gonna complicate it as well.
How big are those lots typically?
Those are tiny.
Tiny, yeah.
You might be able to see the
Those are
dimensions on them. Those are like 25 feet.
Yeah, those are
Oh,
feet,
really?
those are feet by feet, yeah.
Really?
Or, yeah.
That's when they put houses on top of each other.
Yeah,
Wow.
those little cottages for
Yeah.
going to the hot
But
springs.
I'm sure they anticipated some sort of public water
Community system,
Yeah.
so,
But nevertheless, there are lots that have been created exist legally. you
Yeah.
know, So.
yeah,
I guess I would go back to the Lone Pine example for a minute, if you could, James.
On these little tiny lots, I'll just throw something out there. I read history in Missoula
There, that's
County.
good.
There was a lot of study on doing boundary line adjustments, and they have little tiny lots in Missoula, middle of town. And I read the history when they created those, and they had some of the public input from the original subdivision hearings like 1910. The developers couldn't decide whether they should make 100-foot by 100-foot lots in town, or if they should be 50 by 100. They decided to do 25 by 100, so people could buy a combination of those and have the size of lot that they wanted. They never really intended anybody to build on a 25 by 100 lot. They expected people to buy 4 and have 100 by 100, or somebody else might only want a 75 by 100. But once those are created as individual lots,
They're
they
there.
stand alone.
Ah,
You wonder if that was the thought behind those tiny little lots and the same thought that Missoula did. Well, we could buy 6 or 7 of them.
I think there had to be some of that, because even.
wow.
So Ron, these look like they're 100 feet long. What are they wide?
These are, goodness gracious, I don't see it on there. Can you see it on your
Protect your
computer?
neighbors' houses, right?
But I guess,
On my plat, you'd be able to see it for sure, because I have the dimensions on the plat. 1 inch is 140 feet wide. By 50 by 140. Yeah, that's what they are.
so what you're doing here, I mean, these are legally existing lots, you know? So, and aggregating them into 2 lots means there's gonna be less use in one sense, you know, than if there was a house on every lot. If they were to ever go put in a public water system. But, so there's some benefit to what you're doing. I mean, by aggregating and you've got a buildable site, then basically you don't have a buildable site with only being whatever 40 feet or whatever that was wide. So.
And one of the other things that we do also require is a map that shows the septic location, along with the well location. And part of that is to get applicants to be thinking about that DEQ requirement if they're gonna do, something other than a community sewer system. Because these tiny lots would certainly be restrictive on being able to get your spacing from your well to your septic.
Really hard, and it's hard to get wells on this property without me using. In block 7, which is the bottom ones there, I had to put the well 20 feet off the south line and 20 feet off the west line to keep that well isolation zone off somebody else's property.
So correct me if I'm wrong, from a public health standpoint, the only way you could have a septic system that would meet the standard, that you would have to have incinerating toilets or composting toilets, right? You could not have a conventional system on these narrow lots. Unless you aggregate it, I see the wisdom in that, but
Mhm. No, it's really tight. That's why we did.
yeah.
And these are, once we aggregate these 4 lots into 2 lots, the individual lots are 11,200 feet each. If you go to Hot Springs, if you create new lots in the town of Hot Springs, the minimum lot size they allow is 4,000 square feet. Plains is 7,500 square feet, Superior is 5,000 square feet. So 11,000 square foot lot is a good sized lot.
Generous.
The Plains, Superior, Hot Springs have city sewer, city water, not individual sewer and water. The state of Montana, the subdivision regulations, when they started doing non-digs and everything, they had it in there that if you did less than a 1 acre parcel, you either had to have a shared septic or shared well. You couldn't have on-site sewer and water.
Right.
They took that out of regulation because you can't get a 1 acre parcel. That's 200 foot by 200 foot. If you put a well in the middle of that 200 foot square, it's got a 100 foot radius well isolation zone around it, and no part of the drain field or the mixing zone can enter that.
Mhm.
The mixing zone goes out 100 feet from the drain field, so you can't get 1 acre parcels to pass anymore unless you have a street or something, because your mixing zone can go into the street or your well isolation zone can go into the street. If it's a highway, it can only go 50 to a highway. That there's
Or if you
So
don't.
James, why don't you roll up to one of the
Um,
actual submittal things, just scroll down a little.
Quick clarification. So you're saying that
Keep going.
isolation zone cannot go onto somebody
That
else's
one,
property?
that one.
not anymore. That was a new rule that they passed.
Well,
Can't remember the exact date, but
I'll repeat.
about the same time as the water contract, 2017 or something.
Really?
Yeah.
It,
So-
yeah, there's a caveat to that. It can go on if you get an easement from that other lot owner.
But nobody's going to
But
give you that.
nobody's gonna give you an easement.
Now, if you were doing this subdivision and it was all your property and you were creating these 10 parcels that it shows 16 here, the well isolation zone and the mixing zone can go on the other lots within your subdivision.
You probably
So-
put the well somewhere else.
Well, and once you do, when I do a major subdivision like that with 1.5 to 2 acre parcels, I'll put the 2 wells so they're 20 foot either side of a property line, so that those 100 foot well isolation zones overlap on each other, so I'm not using up
That's crazy.
as much property there.
I guess to me, the salient point here is that he's, any developer, any engineer has to go through the DEQ to get approval. And it's a pretty rigorous approval process. So I think our laws or our rules or our ordinance accommodates this through a shared well agreement without a problem. I mean, it's just a good example of all the hoops you have to go through to get something approved, you know? And the shared well agreement, it's something that gets recorded at the county, and it's not something the county requires. I guess I want to make that point.
But what you said, one of the biggest, I understand why he wants it, because one of the biggest problems we have is when subdivision's done with a bunch of shared wells and they don't do a good job of recording the shared well agreements. It's the Hatfields and bullies out there.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as there's a change, it's not documented.
Well, and the biggest problem is that if they do something like this and say there's gonna be a shared well and then sell the lower parcel and they haven't even drilled the well yet. And then the first person comes in and builds on the north half of this and drills the well. And then it's 10 years later when the south half, whoever buys that comes in and wants to build on it. Now they're gonna hook up to the shared well, but they didn't pay for it. And I mean, it's a nightmare. So like my client's gonna be drilling that well up front before he ever sells anything. But we'll file the shared well agreement sells.
But your plat is gonna be your county, the plat that's approved by the county, the final plat. Contains language that it has to have a shared well agreement.
I'm gonna have the easements on the plat. for the connection to the shared well. We have to have a shared well agreement, but we'll file that when we sell the parcel.
Yeah.
So remember, I'm not going through subdivision on this one. If I was going through subdivision, it'd be different. Then the county would make me have that.
Yeah,
Or this part of it.
yeah, that's, these are already exist.
Yeah, so this is kind of a unique,
Yeah.
it's just,
But otherwise, if you were starting from scratch on this, the county would have required that
yes. Part of the subdivision.
as part of the plat process.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interrelated rules that come into this that get into our process too. That's just a good example.
This is helpful to understand. It really is.
And this is just a one, this is a simple project, one of 8 lots that are completely different. One has an existing well on it, one doesn't, so I'm doing an application on one, I'm not going to on the other one, but I'm gonna have to do something with the water rights later on before we sell. And it's probably gonna be easier to just dissolve what's there and start over.
But I've been talking from not looking at it, and
We'll be
sitting
sitting
down
down.
to do that, so I'm happy to sit down with you, and we do that all the time, and I'll try to paint a pathway forward for you, but
I do know how it works off the reservation, and these lots would each be capable of getting a 10-acre foot water right because they were existing. And that's how they do the water rights off the reservation. So if you have a 10-acre foot water right, they might have only claimed 1.5 acre feet for that block 2 house. And so you still have 8.5 acre feet that you can claim on that well. So we would just assign, 2 acre feet for the second person out of that well. And then you still only use 3.5 acre feet out of it, but you could have claimed if you use it.
those lots already exist.
Yes,
So I mean, we would offer you 2.4 acre feet for each one of those lots. Because they already exist, and that's an easy, I can't imagine put multiple wells on a lot, but your biggest problem from our office is your sewer, which is not really us. That would be DEP with the county, sanitary.
yeah, and it's already defined, it's a site analysis.
So, I mean,
Well, from us, what we require, the shared well agreement. Break it down, causes what problem do you?
Just if we have to record it before we even drill the well. Or find out what kind of water right we can file. Because the water right depends on what the well produces, and we haven't drilled the well yet.
so just to help with that, you can draft a shared well agreement and tell us that you don't want to execute it until you drill the well and put the water in use. As long as we have a draft of that shared well agreement, I can condition the pre-approval letter to signify that at the second part of the application process, B, when you file Form B, which is you've got it all done and put to use, that we're not gonna approve Part B unless you take that draft shared well agreement and then do the necessary steps. And the execution is when the property owners sign it, really. The county recording is just that. It's just recorded so that it can be found and by a title company or anybody else down the line as as an ordinance.
And that is the exact process that we would apply. Sort of put the sample in for application, execute it, and file the water right.
And if Haley's already made the determination though that we should be filing it, we would be okay with that process?
Yeah, we've done that process. So we've got to give us something in draft and tell us that that's what you're gonna do, and we can move forward.
Did you have another example of Another subdivision?
Well, I've got a lot of these 20s that are out there, because a 20 doesn't require DEQ review, so there's a lot of 20s being created on the reservation right now. And I've got, go ahead and go to the next.
The other,
Yeah, the other attachment. These are just, they're just 20 acre. That's a 7 lot subdivision, Eagle View Estates, all just over 20, so that you don't have a DEQ, you don't have an application for a water rate, you just file the last record. Here's another one, this is done, there's 2 phases of this subdivision, Buffalo Range Ranch 1 and Buffalo Range Ranch 2. So we got 5 lots. These are being recorded as 5 lot subdivisions, because in the state of Montana, a 5 lot minor has completely different application rules that we follow. As soon as you go 6 lots or more, it's a major subdivision, and everything changes. You're doing environmental assessments, you're doing, it just ups the level. So you see a lot of 5 lot subdivisions. That's why.
So those are, each one of them is a 20 acre?
Yeah, these are 80s that are being split into 4 20s. And then you're dealing with 4 different owners that are becoming you, you know, 20 years later.
Yeah, that's, man, I mean, like, we don't have any problem with that, it's just, well, that's what that is. That process is, occurred already and successfully through the folks trying to.
But I wouldn't be able to do 4 lot subdivision today. Well, maybe if you're doing 40s, and then you're splitting 40 into 20s, these just happen to be 80s that are being split into. This one has 6 lots and then have a little remainder trackway.
Like, we'll just, what do you mean by you couldn't do a 4 lot subdivision?
You don't have an application for anything over 3 lots, right?
Well, that's what they're deliberating on right now, and why you're here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we want to get, because I have.
Access your water for those, but that is exactly, that's the policy that's, that's under discussion. So.
Is there any more after that one? And these are just, there's. So there was 2 phases to that one right there, and that's just the cadastral linkage to that same area. Showing how that. I think out of all these lots, there's only 2 wells for us in this project. Is probably 12 years old.
Go back to your 4 lot subdivision up there now. So if you were, that exists now, but if you were to do that today, and you came into us, because you need to show the DEQ that you have a water right.
You can't forget that those are 20s, because it wouldn't go good with you. If those were 5, say those were 5, someday down 25 acres.
Okay, so
These just don't get some good, these are greater than 20 acres, so they don't go to DEQ, and it's DEQ that drives us to get the letter from either the NRC or the Flathead Water Management.
So do you have an example of a 20 acre 5 lot or 4 lot subdivision in this thing?
I didn't bring them along.
Well, we
I've
could
got-
pretend that is,
Yeah.
right? Just for hypothetical, you
So-
could pretend that is.
Yeah, that's what so hypothetically, let's just say each of those lots, along with the remainder, they're all 4 or 5 acres.
I mean, I have them that's identical to this that we did, so you have to, it's just like that. There was fives. We did 2 5-acre parcels with family transfer to the 2 kids of the guy. He's been in there before. And then he had 35 acres total. So that left a remainder that was 25, and then we're split the 25 into 5 5-acre parcels. And right now, it stands. And we could basically, if we got 10 acre feet for those 5 remaining parcels that we're creating, we could go with 2 acre feet per lot.
So you'd use shared wells in that sort of situation.
I don't see what the shared well really, I wouldn't want to do a shared well, and this is a good reason.
Well, one thing we're struggling with is how many wells we can put in a minor subdivision. So given that you get 10 acre feet and 35 gallons a minute, we kind of, I think one of the things we've been leaning on is toward more like 3 well limit, isn't that right?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chairman and Board, you know, last time we talked pretty significantly about the number of wells that would be, if there will be a maximum number of wells for the development domestic allowance. I caused us to go back and reread the ordinance, and the ordinance language does lend itself to, you know, my interpretation that it could be that none of the individual wells used in a development domestic allowance would exceed 35, but that they're not necessarily considered cumulative. So one of the things that you have in front of you is a redraft that reconsiders that maximum number of wells restriction, but there's a number of redraft considerations in front of you, so that one might have got blended in with the mix a bit, but that is one of the things that we're trying to sort out. And just because each one would be you know, has up to 35 gallons per minute, doesn't, in my opinion, keep the board from setting a policy on a maximum number for development domestic allowances, because there are other factors that make it complicated, such as the totalizers for each one of the wells, the review from the office, that kind of additional considerations. And so anyway, I hope that helps.
The one big thing for subdivision from my end, you can do shared well agreements with DEQ all day long, 2 parcels, shared well agreement. It's just, you have to have a shared well agreement basically filed. If you go 3 or more, it's a multi-user water system, and now we have to have an engineer design everything, and the cost goes right to 0. So I'll tell you, I stay away from these multi-user systems. They're either go full public, everything's a public system, or do a shared well. But that multi-user is it's a poor solution in the middle right now. I don't know why they made it so complicated to get a multi-user water system that they are in order 3 or more.
And Chairman, board members, just as a reminder, when we looked at that loophole scenario, one of the main reasons that we talked about a little bit in that why people aren't coming out and doing 3 shared wells connected to 3 homes each is exactly what he just described to you. This is the complexity with the multi-user rating of 3 feet.
And the cost, I assume.
Yeah, I stayed away from them completely for 25 years. I avoided the multi-user water systems that, you know, you gotta have blueprints. It blueprints all the water lines, pressure at every joint, and you know, whereas a shared well, you have to go to a common pressure tank, and then that pressure tank feeds 2 houses with just a split and pole, and it's just a simple system. And every plumber in the country that plumbs a house can do those shared user systems. They can do the multi ones too, but
Well, while it's not perfect yet, and we're still coming to some final language, in situations like this, I still think we should encourage the state and the tribe to go back and at least think about and consider how the ordinance should deal with all of those platted town sites that are 80, 100 years old in this scenario. Because otherwise we end up making it up. But if the language in the ordinance would be, they address that somehow, I don't know how, but otherwise it's up to us.
Well, I think it may be up to us, yeah.
Well, it is now.
Yeah.
But I'm just suggesting, it might be one of those big picture items that they want to go back and consider whether or not there's anything they can do in the ordinance itself. What it is, I don't know, but
They're tough. Those two town sites haven't moved a lot in the last 50 years. When we had this housing crunch when COVID hit, people were looking for places to go. I fielded hundreds of phone calls on those two town sites. As soon as we told them the only drain bill they can put here is an elevated salmon mound, costs 25 grand for a 3-bedroom house. They had to go somewhere else and find a different spot. Wells are a minimum of 300 feet deep at $70 a foot, plus you've got the infrastructure that goes with the well, so you're looking at 25 grand for your water. 25 grand for a septic system. Yeah, they can buy the lots for $20,000 a piece, but they can't afford to do it.
well, the county and the state and tribe need to get together and break some community systems.
Especially Camas town site, which is right next to Hot Springs.
You know,
That talk has been there, and there's a big need there.
I just finished writing a grant for a different tribe, different state to address an issue just like this. And the grant money's there right now, especially on reservations. There is significant funding to do community infrastructure development right now. Yeah, this just begs a lot of questions that I'm not gonna belabor right now. These are other philosophical things, but why are we still mandating elevated septic systems, that drainage type system that you have to have when you're on clay? When we have other innovative strategies, and I'm assuming that's a county policy, that it's driven by their
DEQ.
state DEQ. But the technology has far surpassed what their regulations are. There's cheaper ways to get that accomplished. That's a conversation for another day, but I won't send us down a rabbit trail.
So we have, in the state, if there's a DEQ circular 4, I think, that tells you which septic systems are acceptable, that the state has accepted. And some of those systems you're talking about just haven't been accepted by Montana.
Yeah.
You get onto the reservation and you can drive around on the reservation because it's just clay. And so I'm picking on the reservation because there's clay there.
There's a lot of clay.
You get a lot of evaporation. That's great for that. If you go to Trout Creek on the other end of the county where you get 6 feet of snow, they have clay too, but you don't get any evaporation. You do get evaporation in Hot Springs. If you go out there and you look at these trailers that are spotted around the country that aren't really in subdivisions, just somebody put a trailer house in, and it's got the little cattail pond behind it, that's their septic system. That's where it goes out. It goes into an old cesspool. That thing creates its own little, I call it a cattail pond. The cattails grow, they remove all the nitrates, the birds and the habitat come in there and thrive on it. They have a septic tank prior to the pond. Those ponds are accepted in Idaho. Montana won't let you use them. And so I can go out of Knox and Heron and to go into Hope, Idaho, just on Clark, Idaho. And they've got those cattail ponds up in that area, and they're big enough to handle some of the snow melt and stuff up there. So they'd be bigger than what you'd have to have in Hot Springs, but they are effective.
Well, for about 20 to 25 years, cattails are like people. They function really well when they're young, but when they get old, they just get rid of all those fluids. So they're not a great solution. But how we handle wastewater in this country hasn't really improved since World War I. Overseas that are using really innovative strategies. There's better ways to do this. We don't have it here yet. That, again, different
We don't wanna
conversation.
spend the money.
We don't wanna spend the money.
I mean, we started requiring these septic permits in Montana in 1993. You know, and so we started designing drain fields in 93, and I think most of the drain fields that we're designing are probably 3 times what we really need.
Mhm.
Put in all these safety factors, and so
Yeah.
that adds cost to
Right.
this stuff.
Right.
We are very young, and there are old countries out there, and you gotta, I mean, I go to other states like Oklahoma, where it's all red clay everywhere you look, and they've got septic systems that are working, and we can't even put one in that. type
Wow.
material there.
May you live in interesting times. We're there.
I don't have much more, unless you guys got questions. I just wanted to kind of go through the subdivision process that we go through. I just used a couple little simple samples. There's a lot to it. I mean, I thought about bringing a book with all the manuals that I have to use when I do a subdivision, because everybody thinks they hire me to split a 10. I just need to go out there and put 2 pins in. What are you charging so much for?
You're like,
Well, we appreciate it. Anyone questions?
very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I appreciate what you guys are doing. Monumental tax.
Well, we won't have mastered what you just presented it by any means, but certainly we're gonna continue to think about the problems we have, so. Thank you.
And maybe in the future, if you got more questions, I'd be willing to come back. If I have some other good samples, maybe I'll just bring a sample next time and just go over and.
If you have solutions.
We find solutions, and that's what you have to do. You know, we have to, every time there's new laws, and new regulations, we have to find solutions, so we can keep moving ahead.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Ethan, that it? You good?
With the presentation? Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you guys. for
Yeah.
having me.
Thank you.
Like I say, good job with everything. you do.
Thanks for hanging out there with us.
And do please consider our door open if you want to discuss any of the things you're trying to move along. You try to help.
And I will say, anytime we call these guys, they answer the phone, they talk to us. I'm on the list. Every one of these meetings, I get notifications. And I usually get it multiple times because I get it for me and my business, and then my individual clients put me as their consultant, so I get notified for that too. So I get lots of notifications, and I see everything.
We're filling up your inbox.
Thank you.
Right.
Well,
If you want us to take you out for something though, we're going.
I can't go past 5,
Either
Can't
night.
either.
so I think 5's our deadline, so. You guys want to tackle something or you want to call it quits? What do you guys? Is there something we can do in half hour?
That is a loaded question, Mr. Chairman.
Take a loaded answer.
Sure, we can look at something.
You guys want to tackle something?
Sure.
Yeah,
Half hour or you want to call it quits?
Yeah, so I gotta go back and look at that.
Half hour.
Yeah.
We got a half hour. You.
He's gonna put in the
yeah,
hair.
we're kind of primed now.
I got a guy
No,
down septic,
um,
40 feet to my property line.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
They tell you, this county doesn't do squat for you. They're a hot mess. I got contacted.
Yes, sir.
I just
We're being recorded.
blown away by that. I have to go look at this.
I tell you, you should. I would encourage you to.
Yeah, if you could save a new version, that'd be great.
I think arguably it might because he took out an old.
Section, would you like to go back into the?
Well, there's
development
just so
domestic
much
allowances?
discussion. I don't know.
Okay.
anything about the daughter
Yeah.
that gotta do. But I would definitely look at that. That's
I
a
would-
public health
Right,
issue.
so-
I was told that the zone had to be 100 feet
I
from my
think it was
lot.
like 13 or 14.
It's 40 feet from.
Yeah, and
Property
if
line.
we
But
just
how many
scroll
feet from
through
your
it
well?
slow so I can see if we
Okay.
got any remaining.
So I mean.
How deep is your well?
300.
Oh, it's deep.
Yeah.
You're probably okay. But
And
it wouldn't hurt.
so we had left this alone for now. I think that you were generally
Review.
okay with this. So far, we were at the section, right beneath this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
13, just like the vice chairman was thinking. Yeah, so we'll, let's cue, Haley up. Hopefully she hasn't left. And we can see if we can get Haley to talk to us about this section. Which I believe is what the board has requested. In here. Yeah. But Haley, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
No, I was not talking. I was just giving time, for board members to read the suggested change, excuse me.
If we can get to where all the board members can read Haley's suggestion right there here. And we'll need to get the chairman time to read this as well. And so just as a reminder, everybody, this is that the section on what to do with existing exceptions to a permit, which is like a 602 that came about either issued before the mid-90s moratorium or a registration honored by the compact. And whether or not that goes towards the count on the total count of what would be considered before a thing got moved, either from an individual or shared domestic allowance conglomeration to a development domestic allowance, or from there to a permit, right? And just to explain it, but not put myself as the target if you didn't like it. The idea here is that both the historic 602s and the modern day allowances are water uses that don't require public notice for adjacent water users. And neither of those would require an adverse effects analysis. In the arrangement with the compact and pre-compact exceptions, allowances, however you want to look at them in your head, there was no crosswalk provided. And the question here is, does this board want to give us direction on that? Should there be a crosswalk? Should there not be? We just need a little assistance on.
So which one are we looking to? The one on the right or the one on the left?
So the language was
Right or left?
Right is Haley's suggestion, left is what was written and chewed up a little bit.
So the one on the right is to replace the one that's crossed off.
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
What's on the right is proposed language. I'm hearing, is that correct?
Clarifying.
Haley, you're on mute.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking at that moment. Was there a specific question?
So, what we're looking at looks like says, is your suggestion for language for this, is that correct?
Yes, at the board's direction.
Yeah, I like it,
May I ask?
yes.
Haley, is your suggestion to replace the entire paragraph or just the part that's crossed off?
James, do you mind just like scooting it back over so I can see? Yeah, perfect. So it's that crossed off portion.
Okay.
I wanted to clarify, that whole section, just, it didn't really read well.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
You go back over to the suggestion.
Would you like me to paste it in this place? You all.
Please.
Oh, that's a good idea. That would help.
Make it smaller, Jim.
You remove the picture. You got move it? Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense to everyone?
I had a question.
Yeah.
This is if the combined appropriation exceeds exemption, what exemption?
This entire section is an exemption.
Oh,
It's a-
okay,
Yeah,
okay, got it, got it.
So I have a question. So one, how did you arrive at that language? And two, how can we disallow an existing state-based water right? Wouldn't that be a taking?
no,
How
this is pretty synonymous with the DNRC's language too, in the combined appropriation statutes.
Not sure what you mean by taking their, and I don't think it's disallowing it, it's just considering it as part of the, combined calculation.
I think, but Roger's thinking, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you have an existing water right for a certain amount of water as a matter of law. And then under the compact and the ordinance, you also have a right as a matter of law. And by decreasing one to meet the other, I think it could be argued that you've taken part of my legal right. Did you get that, Roger?
Yeah, pretty much. And then I guess. To me, I thought the compact honored all domestic uses. Existing domestic uses.
So the challenge then is, how do we integrate those existing uses into a scenario that includes 4 parcels
Yeah,
and that well?
Yeah, Haley's language focuses on domestic allowance, which doesn't address what you're just talking about, Mr. Chairman, and not to say that the previous language was either articulate, but I guess if the board was gonna consider the previous existing uses, that it should be for both development domestic allowances and domestic allowances leading up to the development. Yeah, but
So in this scenario, and it maybe another way to look at it, Haley, is that if we just accept the previously filed groundwater certificate, and you get, and say that that's stands, and then you get three adjoining parcels that creates a four, then it automatically jumps to a permit requirement for that?
So, yeah, whatever the allowance is for the different domestic allowances, because we have to remember that domestic allowance is defined in the ordinance, and it includes individual, shared, and development domestic allowance. So whatever the allowable number is under each one of those, if it exceeds it, then yes, that's what this is saying, is a permit would be required.
So that doesn't discount the existing previously filed groundwater certificate, it just says that the count just starts with it.
Yeah, it's included, like those previously filed certificates of registrations would count towards the eligible allowances, yes.
Yeah.
So there's no decreasing of anything.
Well, so let's just say that there's a 4-lot subdivision and there's already an existing certificate on one of those lots, so that one lot has 35 gallons and 10 acre feet. So by automatic, then you're telling them either they got to get a permit or that whole existing water right is going to be used for the new application.
Yes, I'm not following that.
Well, I guess I'm not following what you have here. I need an example.
Mr. Chairman, Board, can we pop open the James's PowerPoint and
Yeah.
let me try to poke at an example and see if I can help with the schematic. I don't know that that's gonna solve it, but we'll at least give it a try here. You know the slide, I'm pretty sure, there we go, okay, and so this is a scenario where we're gonna kick the screen, make it wiggle so it's harder. Let's imagine that this is now is an existing 602. These houses are proposed, okay? The way that we look at it right now, if this thing wasn't here, 3 applications, good to go. You're gonna roll right through our office with this arrangement. The question that we're making you kind of wrestle with here is, all right, what do we do if this house is here? And the answer to that could be something like, well, you know, you can do that. You know, you can do 2 instead of 3 because you already have 1, right? The answer could be like, you're not going to consider this in the 3 count at all.
Well, let's
Yeah, those are two options.
Let's take this scenario and apply the language Haley just proposed. How does that work?
So is there supposed to be a lot line between those two where it says bog?
There's another.
There's a better one, yeah.
So 4 lots. 1 existing well. 3.
So apply the language Haley just proposed.
If I was gonna apply the language that Haley proposed, and this is existing, just
Okay,
to,
that's an existing with a 35 gallon a minute, 10 acre foot certificate.
yeah,
Okay,
okay. And then we got an application. And there's these 3 proposed. If I was gonna apply it, let's say, we already have 1 existing, you can do 2 additionals. Not 3 additionals. That's if that language persists.
That
yeah.
was her language, but her language says what?
Is that, Haley, I'll put you on the spot, did I interpret your language correctly?
Yeah, so it's basically saying that if there's already an existing certificate or registration, so like that example with bottom one, that counts within the allowable allowances under what we have, you know, it's a couple sections above, but so what, an individual one is just one, a shared is 2 or 3, and then development is 3 or more, right, Ethan?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what that means. So if it's a development domestic allowance that we're going for, then it would count towards the 3 or more. If it's the share, then it would be 2 or 3, so it would count towards the 2 or 3.
So under the scenario, under that scenario, so if they come in and they say, no, they want 4, what's it gonna be? What do I have to do to get that?
So let's go back to the schematic, would you?
Well, I would say a couple of things. If the board was to land on, yeah, we want you to consider it. I'm gonna tell you that we're gonna have to do some additional, like, clarifications. And that would include some stuff about, how to handle, if they want this, we're gonna say, all right, we're gonna treat it like a development domestic allowance, but I really discourage the board from imposing water measurement on an existing use at all. And so I would want to come up with something a little more creative where the water measurement was really only for these new things. Does that make sense? Okay, so I think we're gonna get pointed in the right direction. You guys gotta figure out, like, in principle, you wanna draw a line between pre-compact and post-compact, allowances, exceptions, you know, or if you want to have, that idea of combined appropriations, which is used, around a lot of the rest of the state. In no scenario, is somebody gonna come in and apply and we're gonna say, well, this doesn't count. That is not ever, you know, there's not ever any part where we're gonna do anything to that existing, water right to, not recognize it, in a way that would violate the compact's recognition of those existing uses.
So the scenario I see there is a 4-lot subdivision, which is a minor. Correct?
So it gets tricky if it had been divided, and this is why we couldn't really, like, anchor in on the DEQ's definition. If this had previously been divided, no matter how many new lots there are, it's gonna be a major subdivision because DEQ's secondary division throws it into the major subdivision category. Is that correct? We fact check me. I don't work out at DEQ too much, but I do believe that that's what the case would be. But generally, yes, it's
So just say
minor.
For the sake of Roger's question, can we just assume that it's a
Yeah,
minor?
sure.
Okay, so this is a new 4-lot subdivision with an existing lot.
Yeah.
So under your language, then, and assuming that lot has an existing certificate for 35 gallons a minute and 10 acre-feet, are they gonna have to include that whole amount, that whole volume and flow rate as part of the other 3 lots?
Okay. I would suggest that it would be a mismatch to apply it volume wise, but rather to do it, in some sort of a more of a prorated arrangement where you measure these and the total use for these is restricted at something less than 10 acre-feet.
So I guess we didn't answer the question. So that lot has 35 gallons a minute, 10 acre feet.
Mhm.
Can they come in and then get 35 gallons a minute and 10 acre feet for the other three lots under this language?
I don't know. Haley, what do you think?
You talking about for each one?
No, it's for combined. for all
Combined.
three.
I think it depends on what we set for our allowances. So like what Ethan, what was the exceedance for development domestic allowances that was set in, I think it's like
We contemplated a bedroom unit, equation, limiting things to 20 bedrooms. We softened the language on that, at the second to last meeting. So that it's, there are a lot of options around the 20 bedroom limit and more reliance on the, water measurement, portion and a, water use plan, I think's, the phrase, and then, and so, that would be an option. You could look at the existing house and the number of bedrooms there and factor that into the equation.
That existing house has a waterway.
Yep,
So can the applicant get three houses? They'd have to meet them. Either one or two wells. At for 35 gallons a minute, 10 acre feet. And keep the existing certificate.
I would think that they should have to get something less than 10 acre feet. But that language doesn't, language doesn't fix it, and you guys are gonna tell us what you want.
It's a domestic development allowance, that's what the limit is on. 35 gallons a minute, 10 acre feet.
But it applies to the whole parcel.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out, yes or no. Is that, then you're not honoring that certificate, if that's the case, you're usurping that certificate. Is that
I
correct?
literally don't know what to do here, so
Well,
that
I'm
is,
asking
okay.
you, if your language is telling me that or not.
well,
Is that
if
what
you
the
would,
language that you're proposing says?
I don't know. Which is why I was saying that if, I think it needs additional clarification on how that next. Item
Let me try this angle. Haley, looking at the screen in this scenario, how would you apply the language you propose to this?
So the language that is proposed in that subsection is just going after that existing use and in the certificate and registration, just it's included in your allowance calculation. So how many allowances you have. And this is why, I had suggested looking at counting parcels and keeping that easy. But there's suggestion to consider bedrooms and homes because of the way that the reservation is checkerboarded. And how parcels are split up with ownership. And so it makes it complicated with having to consider these existing uses. So all that language says is that it just needs to be counted towards your number of allowances within each of the different domestic allowances available under the ordinance, the individual shared and development domestic allowance. That's all that language says. We need guidance from what the board wants to set in terms of a line, like Ethan's saying, do we want to set some parameters here? And we can do that.
When you say it's counted in this scenario, when you say that individual certificate is counted toward the domestic allowance.
Mhm.
Are you saying that that's counted toward all 4 parcels?
So how we defined our allowances, which is a couple sections above this in the WP&P. There's the individual, which is just one allowance, and then shared is 2 or 3, and development is 3 or more. So those are the numbers that we have for each type of allowance. So yes, if you're looking here, it would count towards, if this is is this a development? So let's say it's a domestic allowance, right? So 3 or more. So this would count towards like your 3 or more allowances within that application.
Which spreads,
Looking at like exceedances, right? Because we don't want to just give out so many. There has to be a limit on something so that there's not water shortage. There has to be water available for this application. And so that's what the combined appropriation gets at, is we're trying to mitigate any sort of shortage in our calculations. So if the number of allowances under this scenario exceeds that, then they have to apply for a permit. It goes through an evaluation through the office and mitigation, all of that, which is a different area.
um. Go ahead.
With DNRC, if we were doing the same thing, if this was a 4-acre parcel and you were splitting it into 4 ones and you had a 10-acre-foot water right on the house that's existing there, you would have to split that 10-acre-foot water right between the 4 lots. That's simple, it works. Now, if you want to get more complicated, and if this was a 40-acre parcel and you split it in half, you would have to split that 10 acre feet between these 2 lots, but you could get another 10 acre feet on the other half, which is still 20 acres. So I think there has to be some quantification on these lot sizes when you do this. If these are 5s or 10s or 20s that you're creating, if this is an 80 and you're splitting it into 4 20s, they're highly likely to be split again and again. But if this is 4 1-acre tracts, you're probably done splitting. You're back into the town site thing where you're more likely to aggregate than split. I think size matters of the parcels in that whole.
Yeah, that's why I was asking what we are trying to remember how we defined that with the bedrooms, because that's with the parcel sizes, it's kind of easy to, see that, right? When we talk about the quantification or the number with the parcel size and how to split that.
If we did the thing where, consider these all to be, once there's an existing one, there's 3 new ones to be a development domestic allowance and limited to 10. You will also need to, specify how you want us to impose the water measure. So that's just, you gotta tell us, we do it. But we need to know upfront. It does probably make sense to include the existing house at that, if that's the route that we go, on having the total thing stay under 10. And just because this is recognized here, doesn't necessarily like spell out what somebody can do with the rest of, with additional developments.
So for a single domestic, you basically give 2.4, right? Acre feet.
Yeah, we even listed as an up to, the main restriction on that is like, we spec out what it's connected to, stock tanks if you got stock, and that yard size, right?
So. That existing well. I guess. Has a 35-gallon, 10-acre foot on it. The other 3 lots, can they come in at 2.4 acre feet? Under the domestic allowance and get 35 gallons a minute and 10-acre feet to serve those?
For each one?
No, or a combined for the 3 lots.
All right, I'm sorry, I want to answer right. Could you say it one more time?
Okay, so the existing well has a certificate for 35 gallons a minute and 10-acre feet. And the other 3 lots come back in and get a domestic development allowance for 35 gallons a minute and I guess whatever, 7.2 acre feet.
That is an option that we can have for sure. And then are you saying that these 3 would now be a development
Yes.
domestic allowance only because we are factoring in with this existing one, and then we could measure the water here for the 7 point whatever, and then move forward with everybody's lives?
That's what I'm
Okay. That is, we can draft to that effect for sure. And we can specify that an existing 602 with a house pulls out 2.4
But it's
from a development domestic allowance.
pertinent to that house as it is, you know, it doesn't get to spread itself out. It's specific to that house,
Right.
so.
But, you know, we leave it all alone and just affect how we handle these others, is what I heard you
I
say.
guess that's what I'm saying.
Okay, and so then we, instead of, you know, whatever's left would be
I think,
10 acre feet minus
I
2.4.
don't know how you cannot honor an existing water right.
We're not saying not to honor it. You know, again, that's, nobody's saying like, oh, well, we're gonna go back in and just say that doesn't exist. This just affects future development on that parcel that has an existing exception.
I wanna put you on the spot, but could you walk us through what you just described?
So they get an application for a 4-lot subdivision, basically, that has an existing well on it for 35 gallons a minute, 10 acre feet. That water right is already specific to that house.
Yeah.
So really, all they're bringing in is 3 new lots. And the limit, the maximum limit is for a domestic development allowance is 35 gallons a minute and 10 acre feet, but each of these under a domestic allowance, each unit gets 2.4 acre feet. So then there's gonna be 3 that are on a new permit that have 35 gallons a minute and 7.2 acre feet. If they have that much yard, lawn and garden. You know. The 1 lot gets to keep its water right, and then the other 3 get a new water.
And the numbers you put in each one of those would be what?
Well, under a domestic development allowance, you can get 35 gallons a minute and 2.4 acre feet. So the maximum each lot could get would be 2.4 acre feet times 3 is 7.2. But they have to show how much they're gonna irrigate to, maybe less.
It could be different in each one, just the average.
Yeah, just. That would be the maximum.
So Roger, if I'm understanding, your main concern was that the original existing water right not be tampered with. It would just apply The new cut, yeah, okay. Well, I'm tracking. I'm with you.
You know, how many of these we're gonna run into, but yeah,
We're already running into this.
yeah.
That this is not, this is common. This is a common problem that we have. I'm not just like trying to put hypotheticals up here and that's what you guys. You really need to actually figure out what to do. And furthermore, it gets a little worse because sometimes this is just a 602 for 5 acres of irrigation for pasture, you know? The 602s under the state system do not have to be hooked up to a house. You know, so they have a much wider array.
But then that water right is specific to whatever its intended use is, so. You know, if they're gonna hook up a house, then that gets factored back into the new water right.
But isn't that what the language is saying that Haley's proposed?
Not my understanding, right? Language is saying, okay. If we, under the scenario I just gave you. The existing one has 35 gallons a minute and 10 acre feet. If then they come back in with a new permit and get 35 gallons a minute and 7.2 acre feet. Under Haley's language. The new places would get the 35 gallons a minute and 7.2 acre feet. The old water right would get reduced to 2.6 acre feet.
Ah, so there's the linchpin for your concern.
Yes.
Okay, now I gotcha. Okay.
Then you're not. If you do that, I don't know how you can change an existing certificate.
I would encourage everybody to take that home and just think on that. The language is not suggesting to reduce anything or change anything with an existing water right.
That's the way I read it.
Let's go back to that language. You highlight what we're looking at. There you go.
For me, that's exactly what I just said.
And I'm not getting.
The other two things that I have some consternation with is combined appropriations. There's nowhere in the compact that talks about combined appropriations. That's a state of Montana DNRC thing. I recognize the issue there, but I think we're mixing apples with oranges then to some degree too. And I go back to some of our early meetings with the tribe, and this development domestic allowance was supposed to be a way to do small subdivisions, minor subdivisions. You didn't intend that. And like you said last time, you know, we weren't going to be too concerned about these smaller things. The permits are going to address the substantial withdrawals. So that's what the intent of the development domestic allowance is. It's a small water right that can be issued without jumping through the same, because a permit is just unbelievably complicated.
Well, thanks for walking me through that because I was reading it and not getting what you were getting. So I,
You see what I'm saying?
talk slow and use little words. So
Well,
catching up.
I don't. Okay.
Haley, you heard Roger's explanation on that. Can we reconsider the language and try to make the language match that? I mean, I think what you're saying is that you think it does, but I think it's not being read that way.
Yep, I can tweak it.
take a shot at it and we'll think about it. Come on.
Oh, yeah, we're over time. on this.
And it is after 5. So I think everybody wanted to try to close out at 5. So thank you, Haley. All right, Ethan.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, order.
Thanks, Roger. That took me a minute. Took me a
Well-
minute to catch up with you.
Yeah, and I guess that's the way I read it, and I'm open, I mean, if I'm misreading it, somebody tell me, you know, so.
Well, I understand what you're saying about it, and the part I need to consider is how and whether it actually affects that existing water right. Because my initial thought on this was when you hit 4, if there's an existing, yeah, it needs to be part of that. But I hadn't considered
Mhm.
what you brought to the table, so I need to consider that.
Yeah, same.
And I think that's fair. What causes the challenge then is the larger consideration of well density and total volume extraction. Because I think you're gonna get beyond that. I mean, how do we stay within that?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, size of the lot too,
Mhm.
Yeah.
got a factor.
Mhm.
Ultimately, in any given, I mean, we're gonna need to find a balance to this somehow, so we can move this forward. And ultimately, when it comes to the supply. The other part of the language in the ordinance allows the public and allows other entities to address the water level issues. And especially in areas like Hot Springs and Our Lake, we already know the tribe's getting ready. I haven't heard from them, but I think when they're ready, they're going to bring to the table groundwater management zone applications, which will tighten up those restrictions even further.
Yeah, and I believe, there's groundwater withdrawal problems, then yeah, we
Yeah.
need to address them. I don't have any problem with that. It's-
But that's how that's gonna get addressed.
Yeah.
We can't, we're not in a position, I don't think, under the ordinance unless the language of the ordinance changes to take that on. That's been, I think you've raised that.
I need to go, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I think that's it. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, no.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, aye. All right, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ah,